It's not even zip tied.
Thanks, Pete. That's very effective. Still got the projection of an actor. Right, well, welcome everybody. It's really nice to have you all here. It's really nice to be outside. We were just saying the acoustics might be a bit more tricky in here, so if you can't hear at the back, raise your hand, as I just said. My dad is a trained actor, so he can definitely project if needed. Yeah, you'll probably stand up anyway. Yes, Aidan?
Is it being recorded?
It is being recorded,
Wonderful.
yes. The talk is being filmed.
Maybe you want to be
the other
closer,
two
Josh.
talks, so they will be available eventually on the Hardwick website, on a private page on the Hardwick website. So, for those of you who haven't come to the last ones, this is the third talk in a series about the history of Hardwick, primarily Hardwick, but also slightly the local area. The first one was about the ancient history and Iron Age landmarks on and around the estate. The second one was about modern history, the building of Hardwick House, the families who lived there, our ancestors, the Rose family and how they came here. And then this one is to set the scene for how we got to the modern day in Julian Rose's time managing the estate and what happened in that period. So that this will be the last one in the series. I don't know, you probably all know, but if you do need the loo, it's back to the packing shed, and on the left you'll see two green doors just outside the building. We do ask for donations, which cover the costs of renting the building, renting the space, and also the tea. We suggest £3, so if you haven't, would you put money in the pot and buy the tea when you go? And I think that's all there is to say. We'll talk and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So yeah, welcome.
Well, good evening everybody and welcome to Hardwick Estate. You're familiar with it, of course, but nearly all of you, presumably, are very familiar with it, and most of you probably come from it. So, we're going to begin. The whole story begins with four ladies. Bugle, Millie, Valley, and Betty. Bugle is a Frisian cow. Valley is a Guernsey cow. Millie is a Guernsey cow, and Betty is Betty J, who lived in the farmhouse on Path Hill Farm. Died not very long ago, at 100 years of age. She was my mentor for dairy farming, and when I started off, she was in her mid-60s, still looking after the calves, particularly from the herd that had been operating on a very small scale. Millie, Valley, Bugle. Now, they are progeny from a previous herd that was running commercially around about 70 cows, selling into what was then called the Milk Marketing Board. Conventional farming. My mother pretty much was running this side of things, but she was being advised by people who were telling her that you have to use agrochemicals, that you have to use particular methods for milking cows, not particularly traditional ones, that you have to follow certain rules and regulations, and there is no choice if you want to make it commercial, properly commercial, profitable, that is. And she managed very well for around about 10 years. And that herd was sold in 1969. And just those three cows were kept on, Millie, Bugle and Valley. And when I started up, I thought to myself, I don't really want a Frisian cow. I only want high butterfat, which comes from Guernsey cows. So Millie was allowed to run her course, and when she had run her course, I started buying in Guernsey cows, and I started a milk round locally. Now, let's go back in time 10 years from that event. I'm working as an actor in an experimental theatre company based in Antwerp in Belgium, which had its origins in the United States of America, where I joined this touring experimental theatre company in 1971, I think it was. And I got very involved, very engrossed in this work. because it was more than just typical theatre. I had been working a little bit in repertory companies in England, but more stage management acting combination. And I wasn't happy with it. I wasn't cut out to do the standard type of theatre. I wanted something where you had to move, be very creative, use your voice, dance if you like, music. I wanted some much more holistic type of approach. And when I found the two people who directed this theatre company, I suddenly realized I found the right people for my needs, my creative needs. So I joined this company in Boston, America in 1970-71. And we worked there for about 8 months. And then we came to Europe and established a center in Antwerp in Belgium, initially in Brussels and then in Antwerp. And we're teaching actually all age groups, as well as touring this theatre around Europe. We were teaching children a combination of academic studies, classical music studies, and drama. And I'm talking about children starting at about 6 years old to about 12. We had the most incredible results with these children. Some of them they were very international because it was English-speaking school, although 2 or 3 of us were able to speak French quite fluently. Not very many of us could speak Flemish fluently. So we elected to be an English-speaking school. And these children came from parents who were working in Antwerp. A lot of them came from the diamond industry, which was very big there, and they wanted a school where their children could advance. And they were amazed when they discovered their children were just blossoming. So that was a very interesting point in my experiences of theatre and education. But in 1975, a very particular event happened. A number of posters went up in strategic places in Antwerp, announcing someone was coming from an organisation in England called the Soil Association. I was going to give a talk about ecological farming. And I saw this poster, and I thought, I wonder what it's really about. And I've been already thinking a lot about Hardwick. My mother was still running things with the aid of various professional people, and I realized that within a period of maybe 5, 6, 7 years I would have to come back and take it over. So I went to this lecture, and it was from a certain Dr. Devon from UM College in South London. And what he talked about was called organic farming, 1975. And I was fascinated, particularly by a film they showed called The Laws of the Land, featuring a family called the Male family, still very much going strong at the moment, who never went into agrochemicals at all after the Second World War. And that was the point after the Second World War, when the most intensive push happened to move away, or to move into the agrochemical nitrate development of dropping rotations, monocultures. I think you probably know enough about farming to understand some of this terminology. This organization called the Soil Association was talking about stepping back into a time prior to around about 1930 or 1940, re-examining the value of farming without the use of nitrates, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, which actually turned out to be coming into being because of the weapons, excess dynamite, etc., stuff from the weapons of the Second World War. Material for making bombs, like the IRA used, from nitrate fertilizer. Pesticides, herbicides, fungicides particularly were for those gases, nerve gases that we used, etc. So almost the entire agrochemical industry was based on a war concept, a military concept. And actually this is still going today in a lot of the stuff we see going on. A lot of it starts with the military. So when I saw this film, The Laws of the Land, and I saw the Male family walking around their farm, describing to the BBC interviewer how he was managing his farm. And then I heard the lecture for Dr. Devon, who made a very interesting statement about what is health. What does health really mean? And how he described it was a wheel, a dynamic wheel, which connects soil, plant, animal, and man, and then returns to the soil again. Now, this is a very, very meaningful wheel of health, because actually, if you follow the truth in that statement, you will not need any of the agrochemicals, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, or nitrates, and you won't get disease in your crops either, and you won't get big problems with disease in your animals either. You will hardly even need to call the vet. If you really stick to that principle, soil to plant to animal, man, and make sure that every one of those is in good order, you will achieve amazing things. But if any one of them is broken, any one of the four is broken, all the other three are obviously affected. So you have to keep the holistic level. If you cut it, the other three are damaged, and thereby the experiment slowly fades away. Now it sounds like rather mysterious to outsiders, but I was very, very excited by this. And I rushed back to Hardwick. Actually, I went to work for a couple of months on a kibbutz in Israel, looking at the possibilities of other ways of utilizing the land from the point of view, the social point of view, how to integrate people. And when I got back from there, I said to my mother, "Mother, we're going to go organic." And she said, "What's that, darling?" So I said, "It means no pesticide, herbicides or fungicide." And she said, "I'm so glad. I hate those chemicals." So, this was a great start. After all, if I'd had to have a major battle with her about what I was proposing to do, it would have been difficult. But on the contrary, she was hugely enthusiastic. "I hate those chemicals." Well, we got started, as I was saying before. This is the start of the conversion period was then, 1975. That was the start of the conversion period. I came back full-time from Belgium in 1982, and we completed the conversion in 1984. So I had a 10-year period to convert the farm. We had been using some chemicals, not too intensive, admittedly, apart from one very nasty one called paraquat, which kills absolutely everything, and everything goes yellow, and it stinks. And that was nasty. The others were pretty nasty, but not as bad as that. Much of the permanent pasture on the farm was not really treated with anything other than nitrate fertilizer. And so the conversion period, I took it slowly because we needed to keep an income coming in. And we rented out one half of the land to a family called the Goldschmidt family that are in the farm just north of Hardwick Estate. And they paid a decent amount of money to grow crops, keep some animals on the land, etc. But I said there's one condition only: you're not allowed to use nitrate fertilizer or pesticides. And they said, "Nah, nah." But they tried, and they had good fortune. But they only were there 3 or 4 years. So starting off in 1984, approximately, the year Miriam was born. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, quite. And we started off with Millie Valley and Bugle. So I started a milk round, unpasteurized milk. It wasn't yet registered as organic because I hadn't got that far yet. You have to, of course, certify each product if you want to be guaranteed a reasonable price and genuine organic food. But it was in a sense organic because I was very aware that we weren't using any of the nasties. But it was fun. I had bought a second-hand French Fiat van, I remember, Renault van, excuse me. And I started off with about 7 customers. And actually, oddly enough, they were not on the estate, the people who took the milk to start with. They were in Whitchurch, Goring Heath, and Checkenham. I remember quite clearly. Oh, and Upper Basildon, oddly enough. Well, they liked it. They liked this product. And you have to remember, this is a pretty unusual product at that point in time, not popular with health authorities or government or anybody that believes you have to kill everything to make it safe to drink. But the people, some of them, remembered a time when they were young and they only drank unpasteurized milk. So gradually the word spread. And as the word spread, I bought another cow. I found people who had Guernseys living near Henley, and I bought another cow. And this went on like this till I got to about 12 cows. And the date's around 1989. And by then, I've got a student working with me who wants to run outdoor free-range pigs. And I said to him, yeah, you can do that. Make it your little business, and we will help sell them on the milk round. Not the pigs, but to cut up joints of the pig. So that worked out quite well. Then someone else approached me who wanted to run free-range hens. And I said, yes, there's a place for you on Parthill Field. We can give you a couple of acres there and you can run free-range hens there. And we will sell your eggs on the milk round. So gradually, it started to become a little shop on wheels, really. But then something very extreme happened. In 1989, the government decided unpasteurized milk is going to be banned. They've been trying to do this on and off for quite a long time. But this time they found an excuse in some Swiss cheese, unpasteurized cheese called Brie de Meaux, the French side. And they said this cheese has been imported into England and it's got listeria in it. Listeria is quite a nasty thing, gives you a stomach upset. Most people don't have much of a problem with it, but one or two people in exceptional circumstances could die from listeria. So one day I woke up in the morning and I picked the newspaper up and I saw unpasteurized milk to be banned, headline. And this was like, what? What? You know, just getting going, 12 cows, beginning to get an income, and all of a sudden this product is going to be banned. So I had a sort of inspiration, and I asked around, anybody can help me to pull together farmers, small farmers who are still producing unpasteurized milk. And a chap emerged out of the blue who I'd never met, called Marwood Yateman. He was a professional cook. And he said to me, Julian, we've got to get together and we've got to stop this. And I said, yes, Marwood, we have. Who else is going to do it? Nobody. So he put an advertisement in a magazine called The Milk Producer, or The Dairy Farmer, I can't remember at that time. And we got about 75 small dairy farms signed up and called the organisation the Association of Unpasteurised Milk Producers and Consumers. And that was very critical, and consumers. And we devised a sort of plan whereby everybody who had a milk run, they all had milk runs, because that's the only way you can make a living selling these sort of products. You can't sell, it wasn't allowed in shops at all. It was illegal to sell it. So you could only sell it on a milk run. So we devised a leaflet with a tear-off slip, pointing out the value, the great value, the nutritional value, etc., the vitamin value, the nutritional value, how it supports your immune system, and very, very properly done with scientific backing of a lady who was a professional nutritionist. And on the tear-off slip it said, I want to retain freedom of choice to buy unpasteurized milk. And I told them, tell their customers to tear off that slip and send it in to me, and I will accumulate them and I will take them into the Ministry of Agriculture. Well, the second interesting thing that happened was that someone rang me up and said, can I help you? An interesting thing to say. So I said, well, maybe you can. Who are you? And this man lives in Whitchurch-on-Thames. And he said, I'm the lead newscaster for ITN News. I said, yes, I think you could help me. He said, I'll get the team up straight away. So I said, well, hang on, it's going to be Sunday, but we don't have a milk round. home, I said, oh, well, wait a minute, I'll set one up. I said, I'll tell the customers to come out with a glass of milk and say how beautiful it is. And basically, that's what happened. And I had another strong instinct about this, so I rang the BBC and I said, you better get out here fast, because this is where the story is breaking. And it's about the unpasteurised milk ban that you saw. We'll be there. So I organised it. The ITV came in the morning, the BBC came in the afternoon. And we did the milk round twice. And it was headline news the next day. The interview with me explaining why this is the only milk worth drinking. And it must have been a shock for people, actually. What? What is this? But that won the campaign for us, because I was in huge demand immediately after this. Breakfast television, talks here, talks there, talks everywhere. And then something called the Festival of Food and Farming 3 months later. This was started in February, this was in May. I arranged to have a cow there and put a big sign over her saying, my milk is being banned, and paraded her around. And the agricultural correspondent of the Daily Telegraph came up to me. Hello, Sir Julian, have you got a story for us? And I was constantly doing this. I was on very regularly on Farming Today, and they loved it. They loved it. They wanted more and more. And so there was a sort of up atmosphere. So I said, yes, actually I do have a story for you. I've just discovered that the Queen only drinks unpasteurised milk.
Wow.
So he said, thank you, Sir Julian, I'll be off now then. And the next day or 2 days later, headline, Sunday Telegraph, Queen's Royal Pinter to be banned.
Oh.
And of course, it featured me telling the story and all this stuff. The government packed it in after that.
Was it true?
They gave up.
Was it true, or you made it
So
up?
in 3 months, we won this campaign.
Was it true, Dan?
How did you hear that?
Yeah, it is true.
Right.
Yeah, it's true. The whole royal family. At Windsor, they have a herd. Actually, I visited them, saw a beautiful herd. I think it's an Asher cows. And they have a beautiful old bowl where they make the cream the old way, by taking the milk stick and skimming the cream over the top. And they only do, because the reason why they do is because it's a totally different experience than that crap on this table called treated milk. Whoever bought that ought to electrolyte it. I always have to have my rant. Some fool always does something like that. Anyway, you know, unpasteurised milk is vastly superior in every respect. You did it.
How had you heard this? You just heard this from someone. Or
How did you know about?
how did you know about the royal family only drinking unpasteurised
Well,
milk?
I got it through the grapevine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got it through the grapevine. And Prince Charles had already written to me
Right.
saying, brilliant! Absolutely brilliant campaign, Julian. I couldn't give anything of it. Absolutely wonderful. Keep going there. So I was already up in his book.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was fantastic experience. Then back to the farm again. And basically, without going into all the details, we gradually expanded all the enterprises. And the milk side of it got too big, rather too quickly. I think partly from the enthusiasm of someone I had to help me on the farm, who was a very well-practiced, traditional mixed farming expert, actually. Really. But he was a wildly enthusiastic character who rather rushed ahead, and you had to put a sort of a brace on him to try and stop him. Anyway, he was inspiring me to buy more cows and to increase the milk round and all the rest of it. And we did. But it got harder. Everything got harder, because actually, you know, this is not an easy thing. Everything about farming, especially in the Chiltern Hills, on very, very thin soils, and the stony soils, and drought prone particularly, meant we had some years when economically it was extremely difficult. And we were, after all, in a certain way, breaking new ground as well with what we were doing. This was going against the trend to be organic, after all. And there wasn't yet a marketplace for organic food at all. Nothing. So in around 1988, probably it was, just before the milk saga, I was invited to apply to be a board member of the Soil Association. Now the Soil Association is the organisation which basically promoted organic farming in England, starting in 1946, when the Soil Association was founded. And in 1975, when I rushed back to England from the kibbutz, it was via a conference in London called, I think it was, actually I don't remember the title, but it doesn't really matter. But chairing it was a man called Fritz Schumacher. And Lady Eve Balfour, the founder of the Soil Association, was there. And all the old world of people that started this movement for organic farming were present at that meeting in 1975, in South London. And so it was from there that I started buying some books and starting to learn and read about things. But I can tell you, all the best books were written in the 1930s, 1920s, possibly the 1940s and early 50s. That was where the great, all the really important information you needed was contained. It was after that no one was talking about it. So anyway, going back to the farm's expansion and my joining the Soil Association, I was elected onto the Soil Association board, and I worked very strongly to try and promote what Lady Eve Balfour had said right from the beginning about organic food. She was a soil scientist, by the way. Highly reputable soil scientist. She said organic food, not only must it be produced according to soil, plant, animal, man formula, it must be local, fresh, and high quality. So I was feeling yes, yes, yes. And what happened was, when I got on the Soil Association board, it was a very exciting time. We was a team of about 6 or 7 of us, quite young people, who were determined to get organic known. And we started developing very good contacts with the press and all the rest of it. And we started working out some standards for organic agriculture, which later became the Bible for organic food and farming. And we started promoting very widely the idea of organic. And eventually, once the first certified organic products were produced, we decided we ought to have a premium of around between 10 and 20% over conventional food, because the costs of establishing oneself as an organic farmer were high. You had to, everything started from scratch, and if you were at that time allowed to buy in about 20% non-organic food, which shrank to 10% in around 1995, and then shrank to, Tolly will probably remember, when did it go out completely, Tolly?
I don't remember actually.
No, you don't remember. Maybe around 2000. But I think there's still a small window of opportunity. That was in order for people who were starting off to be able to buy in certain things which they couldn't grow themselves. And I had a fascinating experience with this. I had about 250 free-range hens as part of the farm in around the middle of the 90s. And I had a problem selling the eggs in the winter time, because the yolks went a much grayer colour than normal. Because if you let chickens just run around outside, and in the spring and in the summer there's plenty of greenery, and that makes the yolk go a dark colour. But in the winter, that is no longer there, that greenery, and the land becomes pretty barren. And you have to feed them quite a lot more, wheat, whatever it is you're feeding. So I decided I'd make use of this 10-20% bought-in food factor, and I rang one of the main firms in the south of England for chicken feed. And I said, I would like just completely plain, if possible, chicken feed for my hens. And they said, this is what they said: shall we send you the colour chart? I said, what? I said, well, you have a choice of what colour you want your yolk. I thought to myself, what? Are you saying? Everybody uses it. There would be no red, yellow yolks in winter if people didn't put the chemicals in there which make it that colour. Carotene and this and that and the other. So I said, how much would it cost to remove this from the feed? And they said, well, it'll cost you another 10%, 15% more to get it without that. That's at an earlier stage in the production process. And I thought, oh Christ, you can't win. But I did get that food. And eventually, I discovered that it was failing. My yolks were not, of course, going that colour because I didn't have the colour chart and I hadn't chosen which colour I wanted. So I had to go and buy it. I bought a nice rosy coloured red and yellow type yolk, and all my customers were happy again. But I would have lost probably most of them. They said, "Sir Julian, your eggs are bad." And I said, "How do you know?" "The yolk colour." That was it. End of story. I couldn't persuade them. No, that's nothing to do with the actual nutritional quality or the flavour or anything. It's just the colour you're looking at. But that's the colour is what's so influencing. So I had this compromise and I bought into the agrochemical farming system and put the colour down. So all of you know now, if anyone goes shopping in any supermarket, which I hope you don't anymore, you'll know that the eggs you're buying contain a lot of interesting chemicals to make the egg orangey red colour. So that was a fascinating experience. And of course, overall, what you realise is the more you progress down this route, trying to reach something which is truthful, honest, real food, you have to overcome hurdles after hurdle after hurdle after hurdle, because nothing that we eat today is of that progeny. It's none of it. It's absolutely none of it. You couldn't, possibly preserve for the amount of time it takes food to reach supermarket shelves, etc., if you were selling absolutely fresh, local food. And anyway, the experiment, we did an interesting research project during the 1990s with a group who were interested in exposing the food miles scenario. And we discovered that the average distance travelled by a supermarket trolley worth of food, the typical food you'd have, was 12,000 kilometres. And unfortunately, we discovered also that the organic food that was being brought in was even further. Yeah, and it was already, by the mid-90s, importing organic food was starting to happen. Before then, it was almost entirely from Britain. So when you understand this, and when you think about what this is, you have this situation where something's been grown in South America and it's taken 3 or 4 different temperature changes before it ever gets to a supermarket. It goes through a pack house where it has to be separated and then boxed. And then it's driven to another place, and then it's eventually put on the supermarket shelf with tenderizer on it, or a special light to make it look good. It's wrapped in cling film. So anything that's from the fruit and veg line has lost all its vitamins anyway, at least 50%. So what you're getting isn't real food at all. It's fake, honestly. All of it is fake. So we were interested in real food. And since we're sitting in the market garden, in 1986, a gentleman called Ian Tolhurst joined the team at Hardwick. Now, I had my eye on the market garden since I first started, but it was a mess. Basically, it was all like the far end. And the brambles and weeds and nettles, and there were 1 or 2 buildings, like this one here, for instance, was just about standing but needed a lot of work. And I put an advertisement in a magazine, I don't remember which one it was actually, asking would a family be interested in coming to take this place on and transform it back into its former glory as a Victorian walled market garden, which my great-grandfather would have been enjoying the products of very much 100 years earlier and before. And I had actually had 60 replies, and supposedly enthusiastic people. Keep an eye on the time, because I am. And I skimmed through them all, and I whittled them down to about 8. And one of the 8 was Lynn and Tolly and his family. And it was quite obvious to me that he knew what he was talking about, whereas the others actually didn't, but were pretending they did. So I asked Tolly at that time, show me what you would come up with if I asked you to do a rough sketch of how the market garden could be revived and what sort of methodology you would use. And he did a very good 2 or 3 page report. And that sealed it, didn't it, Tolly?
It did, yes. And I can remember coming to look at the garden with you, and we both stood in that gate, which is still there. And I looked over the gate, and the whole place was completely down. I thought, yeah, this is mine. Nothing like a challenge.
So you had to have a good think about it.
I did have a good think about it.
He was very captivated by the atmosphere of the estate, I think, one thing and another.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's when Tolly joined me, and all this, while I was beavering away on the farm side of it, Tolly was beavering away down this side of it. And we turned out to be a very good relationship. And in fact, to help it to get started, because it's clear that Tolly didn't have the money to be able to invest in all these buildings, etc. Whereas I had enough, but not a lot, but enough. So I invented something called a share farm agreement. And I think I can remember the split. I said, Tolly, you take 94% of the income and I'll take 6. And we did it that way for, I don't know how many years, quite a few, wasn't it?
I think it was about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, 7 or 8 years.
It worked very well.
It worked very well.
Yeah.
And Tolly came and reported to me once every 3 months or so with his accounts. And that's how we did it. So that was
About 15 minutes.
15 more talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want them?
Yeah. So, yeah, are you enjoying this?
Yes.
You're very quiet. You're very attentive. Okay. I just want to make a note of a few things. I just want to check, see if I'm leaving anything out that I need to tell. Interesting experience being on the Soil Association board was because the government started taking an interest in official organic standards, whereas the Soil Association had been, as a charity, independent charity, had been setting the standards. And the government suddenly decided in the early 90s that it wanted to set standards. And it was called the United Kingdom Register of Organic Food Standards. This organisation was set up with a civil servant in charge of it. And a few of our original gang who got the organic movement started were asked to be on this committee, but only really as onlookers and to correct them if they got anything badly wrong. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. They went incredibly slowly, and they decided they had to reinvent everything. But they worked from the work that we'd pretty much done ourselves, but they nevertheless had to go through every single point, and they tried to subtly alter bits and pieces of it. And we had to hammer them and hammer them. It was really very, very worrying thing, because you could see that if they ever got it into their clutches completely, they would simply devise something which was easy, profitable, and probably a good export market. And because that's the way governments think. They don't think about human beings or about quality or about anything to do with that. Simultaneously with that situation, I got involved with an organisation called CEDA, South East of England Development Group, as an advisor on rural economy issues. I've been very interested in rural economy, and I've been doing work on helping small communities be innovative, even during some of the time I was running the farm. And I had an extraordinary inspiration while I was working with CEDA, because they were basically looking at how to revive market towns. And I recognised in South Oxfordshire there are a number of very beautiful market towns which are completely dead in the centre. They come to a tea room and a bank and a laundry and a something, but a beautiful old market town that must have once upon a time been thriving with life. You imagine all the produce coming in off the land, markets, people playing music, fresh, good food, and I thought we must try and recreate this. So I wrote a short document, 2 pages only, 2 sides of A4, and I presented it to a group of people who were called the Oxfordshire Economic Partnership, which I was invited to be on at that time, a rather high-powered group. And it was also connected with CEDA, South East of England Development Group. They were sort of linked. And I'd gone to about 2 meetings of this organisation. I couldn't understand a word anyone was saying. They used acronyms instead of plain English. So one day I very bravely said, could you use plain English instead of acronyms? And everyone said, yes, could you? Well, I don't understand what you're saying either. It turned out the whole board really didn't understand what Commander was managing and putting the thing forward suggested. So I said, I've written a paper. You probably think it's ridiculous, but I'd like you to look at it. And 2 people on that group of about 12 said, this is the first common sense thing I've seen since I joined this organisation. And we should do it. Okay, what was it? I chose Farringdon and South Oxfordshire as my market town. And I came up with the idea that it should be self-sufficient in food, fuel and fibre by 2015. And this was the year 1999, I believe. And I said, I can see how this could happen. This is a town of 10,000 people, surrounded by, happen to be, a lot of organic farms. Beautiful part of the world, stunning. Gorgeous old market town, very unspoiled, but dead. And they were all thinking that Tesco was going to save them, basically. So I got a lot of inspiration about this, and we had a meeting, and a very large number of people came to it in the town hall. And we kicked this project off. It had the backing of Oxford Brookes University, South East of England Development Group, and the Vale of the White Horse District Council. And they all put money in, and they raised about £1 million very fast. I organised some workshops for local people in different categories: renewable energy, food, ecological food, educational issues, land management, forestry, and I chose people who were local but quite knowledgeable in each of these sectors, and I said, you start these workshops according to the plan and work out what the requirements would be for 10,000 people to be self-sufficient in all those products. Work it out. And I knew in my own mind that it wasn't even difficult. Depends on the distance you go out, but within a region of about 5 or 6 miles surrounding Farringdon, there turned out to be enough of everything to support that town. However, one man in this group was completely against this project, and he was the leader of the town council, no less. And he stood up during this meeting and said, "This is the biggest load of crap I've ever heard." And there was a silence. The whole room fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. And I was like, "What?" And I think it must have been half a minute before someone stood up and said, I don't agree with you, Mr. Cloggs, whatever his name. I think this sounds quite interesting, project. He said, "We don't need food coming in off those farmers' land. We need Tesco." And I thought, oh no, please. And then a great argument started, and it got quite exciting. And we came out the winners in the end. So that project got started. Well, this is getting on a bit. This is now coming up to the year 2000. And I had been having a divorce proceeding with my dear ex-wife, Miriam's and Lawrence's mother. And I had been invited to go to Poland to be involved in possibly something called the International Coalition to Protect the... I was going to say it in Polish, that's what's so funny. Międzynarodowej Koalicji dla Ochrony Polskiej Sea. Any Poles in the audience?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So anyway, that suddenly happened, and the divorce proceedings, and then everything in my life was topsy-turvy. And I went to Poland, and I was very taken by this project. And by then James Norman had come onto the scene, 2 years earlier. And James had lost his farm that he was running in a similar circumstances to my own, I think, actually, as I recall. And I was feeling that I needed to move on, and that there was obviously a time of change taking place, and I could feel it in my veins. James came and he saw the farm, and he saw the meadows by the river. And I remember standing with you, James, and looking at them, and James said, I could plough these up. And I said, I stood rather quietly and didn't say anything. I could plough these up because they'd be very, very fertile. I think we'd get very good yields. And then I said, probably later, I said, you know, James, they'd never been ploughed. They'd never been sprayed. They're survivors. They've never had chemicals put on them. And James went, ah. Wow. And James, this was the beginning of James' love affair with those meadows. I would actually.
Are you sure I said that?
Yes.
I think that's almost slander. I think I said I've always wanted to have a meadow like that.
No. When you really realise what they were, we weren't standing too close to them. That's why they saw them. But once you saw them, yes, you did. So anyway, James joined the team. So and we welcome him here tonight, of course. So anyway, this is getting to the end of my talk, really. There are lots of details, of course, which I had to leave out because I'm trying to encapsulate quite a long period of time in a very short talk. But I wanted to end off by saying something that Hardwick and the forestry side of Hardwick, which I didn't really have much chance to talk about. I let my mother, almost to the day she died, look after the forestry side because she was very, very knowledgeable about it. And it always moved at a much slower pace than the farm. Quite obviously, forestry is that way. When you're planting a crop of trees, the hardwood trees, you have to wait 130 to 150 years before you have a harvest. And of course, it's not you that gets the harvest. Your grandchildren, if they're lucky. On the farm rotation, you wait 4 or 5 years. Well, you get your harvest once a year, but you have to go through the rotational process, which means you put it down to grass clover layers for 2 or 3 years before you can get another harvest. So you're working on all these different time frames on these things. And there were some very immediate ones, some intermediate ones, and very long-term ones, and that's the woods, the forestry. It's a very long-term one. And now we have Ben, who I don't think is here tonight, Miriam's husband, who's taken on the woods, and I'm sure you've heard about it already, or you will be hearing all about it.
We'll be hearing soon.
And he's very go-ahead, and he's a very good forester. But what Hardwick stands for in my mind on the bigger picture of life makes me think of Wat Tyler, who in, I couldn't remember the date, so I had to write it down, 1371, started the Peasants' Revolt in England. And what he did was he jumped up on a hay cart and said, hey, the barons are destroying us. The tax collectors are destroying us. The king has lost faith in us peasants. And he jumped up in his hay cart and he said, and John Ball, I think he was called, the priest, jumped in with him and said, yes, and the church is allowing it too. And so there was a great "Hurrah!" from the crowd. You can imagine the scene. And he went from farm to farm saying this. He said, we must survive the peasantry. We must come together as an army and go to London and make our case. And on the process, if they don't accept us, we'll have to burn things on the way. We'll have to be like a real army. So Wat Tyler had this vision. And the key issue is this. He said, England should be a nation of self-governing communities. And I believe that is the future of England. And I believe Hardwick is one of the early templates, going to be one of the templates for this. This means everybody living on Hardwick has to get seriously radical. Because what we've got coming under the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and I'm afraid King Charles, is an absolute nightmare of the worst order. And if I give another lecture here, it'll be about that because it's a very big subject. But what the book that I recommend you reading, Overcoming the Robotic Mind, Why Humanity Must Come Through, is because the end of this story, and it's supposed to happen by 2035, is that we become robots. Mm-hmm. We have our DNA altered, we have our brains plugged into supercomputers. There is no farming, everything's grown in petri dishes and laboratories. It's already started, there are already 7 big factories producing fake beef from cells taken out of animals. Farmers, anyone left on the land who is redundant will be put into something called a smart city, specially designed for them. It'll be run with 5, 6G, highly intense electromagnetic wavelengths. Everything will be surveillance, 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 surveillance. You won't be able to move. It'll be a repeat of what happened in lockdown COVID, but worse. Now, this is not me making up a scare story. This is fact. And this is fact which is in the public domain. You will find this if you get off the mainstream and go into the alternative stream. I mean, you have to use things like DuckDuckGo, and you can't do anything using Google, and you'll never find any information like this at all. Dogpile, I recommend, and DuckDuckGo, and then ask questions, and you will find massive material. And this is material which is peer-reviewed, quite a lot of it. It starts with global warming. There's something called net zero by 2050. What that means, supposedly, is no carbon dioxide by 2050. That means you won't be able to breathe, right? Yes, you won't be able to breathe because carbon dioxide is what plants take in and give off oxygen, and we breathe that oxygen. So it's the key element of the cycle. Net zero means no carbon dioxide. It's a massive scam, this whole global warming thing. But it's another lecture. This is when I really get heated on this subject. I've been telling you a bit of history, but now I get really heated. But anyway, the point being that what Tyler said, England should be a nation of self-governing communities. Well, surely we must all be arriving at that conclusion by now. Is there anyone who believes that government is capable of running anything? Only we the people can take over. And we the people, unfortunately, have to go through a process of becoming aware. Anyway, what's the point in electing people if you don't know anything about what's going on? You don't know who they are, it's all a waste of time and energy. We have to become aware. We have to become leaders. And one day, we will vindicate what Tyler. And England will become self-governing communities. Self-governing, you see? That means everybody has to become responsible in some way or other. And responsibility is not popular. We all try to avoid it, if we can. Yes. But we are moving towards a situation where we're going to be developing a cooperative. I think what Tyler would approve. And in that cooperative, people will be given responsibilities. They'll take responsibility, real responsibility. And probably it's the only way we'll learn. So it's a big risk. What if people say they'll take the responsibility and decide it's too much like hard work? And I don't think I want to do it. What happens then when the whole place is no longer under a dictator like me? What happens then? So we're moving into an exciting and very meaningful time. And I leave you with that, and thank you all for attending.
So open the floor for any questions.
I do recommend, by the way, this. It's my most recent book, 2019 I wrote this. And it's got a lot of the stuff I was just getting into. at the end of the talk in it. So you will be inspired, I hope, by this one. And the others are books written earlier, but I still recommend them.
Aidan.
I just want to give a response to the Hardwick estate. We've been here now a few years, and when I first came here, it was quite a strong reaction we had to the estate in respect of the ethos and the values you had. And over the time of being here, we've learned what that actually means, and talking to people on the estate and the like, and it's been very influential. The complete and utter ironic thing is I run a public project myself that involves a robot, and then the owner of the house I live in writes a book about not really taking on robot minds, and the absolute direct relationship to that couldn't be clearer. So far is the ethos that we've fallen behind and grabbed hold of and wrestled with, is that we've actually reorganised our own project to really embrace some of these values. So I actually just want to publicly say thank you to you for being extraordinarily fast in your views in what is clearly a very difficult thing to achieve. And now we're using this robot to mirror some of the ugliness that's coming up. We're very clear that our project is about mirroring some of the terrible things that are going to be coming in this next few years. You know, the rise of AI, and that's certainly going to affect agriculture in a very extreme way. So I would say actually what's coming up in the future is one hell of a fight in actual fact, because I've already seen the efficiencies, they call it efficiencies, that's going to be attacking agriculture with AI. And actually this whole ethos of this estate has made actually me very gritty towards fighting that battle with you. And we're doing it in a completely different way to yourself. I don't have the land to demonstrate that with, but I do have a voice in a name of a robot that really fights that cause, in particularly highlighting some of the negative aspects of where this world is going as regards food production. So I just really want to say that we're massively supportive in what you're trying to achieve. I think it is extremely difficult, but we couldn't be more enthusiastic, and I hope that actually we can talk as a community more and more about this, because in actual fact where we're going as a world, especially with these new technologies coming in, I think we've got an ever harder battle to fight, but I do believe that actually this is the right way to do it. And so it was more of a statement than a question, but it was really just to give you your support, because I think you've done something extraordinary and you've had a massive and profound effect on me and my family in the respect of what we actually do every day.
Thank you. Thank you, Aidan, for that.
Another question there? Oh, we have another one from Paddy. Yeah, go ahead.
A narrow Hardwick question. Why are the horses leaving?
Well,
I'm better to answer that properly than that. So, I mean, I think in a way, you know, Dan, I call him Dan. I can't call him Sir Julian. He's illustrated, you know, why organic farming is so important to us, and why organic farming is so important to the world, and especially now, you know, that we have such a food security crisis. I think we already had one, you know, when the period Dad's talking about, but it's worse now. And we all saw during COVID what happened when there weren't vegetables on the supermarket shelves, and we had queues to the veg shed. The veg shed actually had to ration food. So to us, food production as a family, and I think also as an estate, well, we know as an estate because when we went through the work of looking at transitioning the estate to another ownership structure, first of all we did a family visioning process to see what our family vision was between me and my brother and Dad, and then we did a community visioning process to see if that aligned. And in both of them very strongly came out that, you know, organic produce, food production was at the core of the ethos. And the horses sit on the most fertile land on the whole estate. That strip which runs, I mean, Tolly's fields on one of it, and it runs all the way to the bit which we were mentioning, which James Norman, didn't want to plough or did want to plough. Anyway, that strip is the most fertile strip on the whole estate. So actually to have
So it's
pleasure
going to
ponies,
organic food.
that's right. So to have pleasure ponies on a bit of land which actually has like this deep soil, when the whole rest of the estate's got this, just doesn't seem to make sense in the world we're going into. So that was a very difficult decision, but felt like a really necessary decision as we move forward to put it to food production. And then the other thing is, the other thing that came out very strongly in the community and family visioning was a desire for more kind of public facing, like a farm shop, which we had, but now we have Parkle Outdoors in that venue, which is very, very valued. We wouldn't want to get rid of them. A farm shop, perhaps a cafe, more spaces for artisan craftspeople, all the things which are part of our ethos. And really the stud farm buildings, because it's very hard to get planning around here, as you probably know. We wouldn't be able to build new buildings, we'd have to convert. And the stud farm buildings are the most obvious place where you could actually have those entities public facing. So that was the reason. I know it's, I know for local people it's a bit, it can be a bit of a shock because people are so used to the horses. And one of the things we didn't do, which we will now do, is actually have a public consultation about that. So we will be having a meeting in the village where people have the opportunity to talk about the whole transition at Hardwick generally, and and input their thoughts or concerns. I hope that covers that. Paddy had a question, and then can come to you.
Thank you for the talk. It's Patrick from Hempton up at Half Hill. I'm really heartened to hear actually the history and then what you finished it with there, and then Aidan's response to that, because I think that since I've become to the estate, there's always been a sign on the front, one of the fronts saying no GMO, no 5G, and I think that reflects the spirit of what you've brought to that, and I think that a lot of the benefits of the organic, being a pioneer of organic and a pioneer of some of these other future-seeing health risks, that are basically about the sort of biocontrol of our world, starting with the land and our food, etc. We kind of benefit from that by living here, and it's really quite magical. I think everyone who lives here and spends time here would agree. And with what you're I suppose you're writing about in your books and talking about in the future lecture, it would be good to sort of start to think about the estate going forward into that time a little bit more, and have a bit of an interesting conversation with Aidan, who's obviously very well versed in the world of AI and all of that, and some of the incredible knowledge that's in this tent right now and on the estate, and actually start thinking about things that are a little bit difficult to talk about because there's a big machine trying to divide us and rule us around those topics, so we can't actually have a conversation about AI, or we can't have a conversation about GM foods or whatever or GM anything actually these days. So my question is to Julian is if you would be interested in leading a bit of a conversation in the estate, being such a pioneer of this way of thinking, where we can come together and actually start to just have an open forum where nothing's wrong, but we don't have to. It doesn't need to be something where people argue and pick one side of a fence or other and take pot shots at either, call each other crazy or anything. Where there's a sort of open space and anything is fair game to discuss, and we can work out. All right, we might have different opinions, but what's the common thing that we all want to do to address some of these issues? And it might not be we all want to do it. It might be that some people want to do this and some people want to do that, and that's fine. But we are actually able to talk about it because so few communities are able to talk about some of the concerns that you've probably written about in that book. And there isn't a community in the first place to even talk about it in a lot of places.
Well, yes, I certainly would be happy to do that. The thing is, I'm aware of one.
Yeah.
But if we can set it up for the next time I come.
How often are you back?
Well, at the moment we're not quite sure of dates, but it would be in the autumn.
Is it what's the sort of?
Normally we come 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay.
It's a little bit dependent on things. The whole other part of my life is things we're doing in Poland.
Yeah.
And we're very involved there, very actively involved.
Yeah.
So it's like juggling a little bit, but I can let you know in advance, possibly through Miriam, and we could plan such an occasion.
Yeah.
And I understand that in the meantime you already are having some meetings.
Yeah, lots of people are doing particular
Yeah.
things. I mean, Tash organised a really interesting talk in a similar vein, and then
But
we
I
started.
would be very happy to do that. It's the answer to the question.
Cool. We'll take a few more because I saw some more. I'll take one more there, and then I'm going to use my privilege to ask a question as well, and then Matt. So do you want to have a
Me?
question? Yeah.
No, I didn't have any question. I just will hear more to listen.
Okay.
But I know
please
that
put your
Julian's
hand
going to be
up.
next week in Poland. And I'm going to be the same place. So,
Oh, great.
yeah, so you're going to be there for like four days? Or you're just going to be
He
there
lives
for
there.
others? 3 days.
Harmonia Cosmosu.
Okay, alright. Yeah, Harmonia Cosmosu, yeah.
We will be there.
Yes, I know I wouldn't really match you, so, hope we're going to have the time to chat. Yeah.
Was it lovely?
Okay, Matt, go ahead, and then I'll jump in.
Have you kept up with how Farringdon are getting on, or how they got on up
That's a
until
very good question.
8
Who's
years
asking
ago?
it? I can't see it.
Matt, right at the back.
Okay, hello.
Um,
I'm afraid to say, well, actually, it's very interesting what happened. I had to abandon it. In the end, I completely abandoned it, but I left a few people primed to try and take this forward. And basically, only 2 did. But nevertheless, it was very significant what happened, because I made the point of this local food for local people issue. And what happened was the butcher decided he was only going to source local beef. And this was already a big thing. This is a small town, and everyone knows what's going on. An arts enthusiast opened up a loft in a building above the town hall for people to play music together and share music, have gigs and all that sort of thing. Another thing which happened was walks around local organic farms so that people could be educated into organic farming. There were 3 or 4 more things like this. And what happened was the Saunders family were very involved. This is a big organic farm right on the edge of Farringdon. They were right involved from the beginning. Pat and Dorothy Saunders. And they were determined that Farringdon was going to see the benefit from this effort. So they discovered something called a Market Town Award competition for the whole of England. And they entered Farringdon, and it won something like 5 times in a row. So they said to me, Julian, although you couldn't see it through, Farringdon's been transformed. We're already on the map now, and people get the idea. But no, I'm sorry to say that food, fuel and fibre being self-sufficient by 2015 has passed and has not happened.
Could be a very good aspiration for Hardwick, couldn't it?
Yes,
You
it
could
could be
mimic that here.
it could be Whitchurch village,
Whitchurch, exactly.
even Pangbourne included, and the whole thing could be repeated. Not difficult to do. Have a round table group of people who discuss the value, the need, and the costs, and the price that could be paid. Yes, this is getting close to what Tyler again,
So I'm sneaking in with my question. My question is, well, I've got 2 actually. One is, could you say a little bit about how you're thinking about bringing art and agriculture together, which you had when you first came back to the estate?
Right.
And how did that manifest itself in your time here?
Actually, this question goes back to the very beginning of my talk when I described the Soil Association working on the principle soil, plant, animal, man. And in our theatre group, in our experimental theatre group, we were working also with a principle which is extremely similar. Because acting is a profession which by and large mirrors the existing state of society and does not inspire. But if you want to inspire, you'd have to do something different, a new type of theatre, a new type of actor. We worked with the connecting the text, movement, the spoken word and music, and seeing how they holistically could be brought into one context of a new type of theatre. So actually, right from the beginning, I had this sense of a quantum connection, because it's quantum physics we're talking about if you want to look at it scientifically. Everything connected with everything under quantum physics means, particularly actually, when you're going deep to find creative process in yourself in the arts, you're touching on exactly the same vein as people are who are going deep in themselves to try and work with nature in a positive spirit and use the knowledge you know, in a practical, hands-on way, to develop a new form of agriculture, a new form of respect, if you like, for the ecology, the planet, after all. So there was, for me, personally, at that age, tender age of about 28, I had this extraordinary sense that there's no split between the arts and agriculture. And people used to always say to me, how could you go from being an experimental theatre to farming? I mean, it couldn't be more opposite. People always used to say this. I said, no, it's not opposite, they're totally interconnected. Well, okay, that's the sort of person I am. I see these connections and I try and work with them. But to see the connections, you have to be very, very open to that creative spirit. And then you start getting advised by higher forces. And you start opening yourself to higher forces, and you are led towards solutions to things. And I've had this gift, you might even call it, from a very young age. And it was only quite late in my life that I recognized that I had this particular gift. And I can say we all have it. We all have it. And the question is to work on it so that we connect up with universal cosmic forces, because that's where we came from. That's who we are. We're splinters of God, let's face it. And therefore, we need to bring out that godliness in ourselves. And that will be what changes the planet. Nothing else can. Especially when you've got completely dark side, satanic people running at this present moment. Only a lot of light, genuine light, not fake. Only that can really make the change that will make the planet into what we want it to be.
Julian, both yourself and Aidan mentioned about the oncoming deluge of AI, which supposedly is going to transform agriculture. And this, for those of you who are old enough to remember, Ian Paisley, this makes me come over all never. Ian Paisley's catchphrase. And I just want to give an example of that came to my attention recently. We're always being asked to take part in research projects of various kinds. And recently there was one which was perfectly serious and was being run, I can't remember, I think under one of the organic farming initiatives, and it was to do with a project to measure grass quantity in your fields from satellites. So what they wanted to do was to get people to sign up, and then you would get information from the satellite, and it would all be fed into a huge piece of software, and it would tell you how much grass there was in all of your fields all the time. And this, to me, is absolute anathema, and I rejected this quite forcefully, giving my reasons, because this, and Schumacher would have been aghast at this kind of thing. This is the kind of thing which removes the human element. I feel I know how much grass is in my fields. All I do is I walk in the field and I can see, and I know what the carrying capacity of the farm is. And when the cattle run out of grass in one field, they let me know, and then I move into another field. I don't need a satellite or a computer to tell me that. So I'm just going to repeat again that on my watch, never.
Come on, everybody's going to do never. No excuses, I'm afraid.
So on the back of that, can I see from my last question, which is
We'll have to speak up now.
Yeah, I'll speak over the range. So the question is, given what you talked about, the movement to agriculture, the organic movement in Asia, and as far as I understand it, because of all the influence of organic quantities in the supermarkets and so much of it comes from food, we haven't really increased the area of organic farming in the UK significantly at all over the last 30, 40 years, or really at all. So what is the organic movement doing wrong? And what do we need to do differently to actually, to change that, in your view, as a long-term organic movement?
You really stayed from number 4. Okay, well, no, in essence, It goes back to my argument with the Southern Association Board, when they said, without selling food in supermarkets, you can't grow the movement. Now, this became a sort of buzz expression. You can't grow the movement unless you sell organic food in the supermarket. You see, this is a really difficult conundrum, actually, because once you get into mass production, you get into a lower quality, and you get into a lower standard of expectation even for food, and you get into this lowest common denominator formula, which is pile it high, sell it cheap, which is American after all, and that's what came to England, and that's part of the major problem for organics is you can't actually combine very large scale production in organic farming with what the supermarkets are demanding in terms of both quality. I mean, supermarkets, Tolly will tell you about this, they on average reject at least 30% of all the vegetables that are presented to them because they don't look right. Not because there's anything wrong with them technically, they reject them because they don't look right. Well, this is not absolutely crazy idea. So I think, personally, that it has to be starting from the principle of local, regional hubs and centres of sale in market towns, block schemes, the things that we're doing, various inventive ideas as to how you can get local food to local people. Now, everyone is a local person because every region of England has its particular culture, dialect, food, etc. You have to divide that. Because that's what's been pushed out by the European Union, by this scheme. The whole idea is to have one standard for all Americans. And that standard will involve very, very poor quality. Fighting against the weather!
If I can reach out personally, I think I am responsible. I am thinking that the most important is to re-establish trust between us. And then we can completely abandon plugs and all this control and all this regulation and have the certified official on paper. Because in fact on paper you can have certified farm which is very bad farm. But all is about this to come back again to trust each other and work a local level, and then we don't need all these hard papers that we need to pay. We have in Poland quite a big number of organic farmers who just simply stop it to apply official paper. Because it's costly, because it's a big headache, and it's just they have big number of consumers that come to them and they don't need this paper, just the rest of them.
Okay, probably a good time to leave it at that. Very sort of toward the end. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, the lecture series will continue. The next series will be about land. So it'll be all the different farming and followers and farmers. Thank you so much for taking. Thank you.